Charlie Chaplin was born on April 16, 1889, in Walworth, South London, into one of the poorest districts of the British capital. His early life was defined by deprivation, instability, and institutional neglect. His father, Charles Chaplin Sr., was a singer and actor who fell into alcoholism and died when Charlie was still a boy. His mother, Hannah Hill, suffered from deteriorating mental health, and after she was institutionalized, Charlie and his half-brother Sidney found themselves in the bleak embrace of workhouses and charity institutions. These early years were marked by hunger, forced separations, and exposure to a bureaucratic system that viewed poverty not as a social failing, but as a personal one. Yet out of these experiences emerged one of the most transformative artists of the 20th century. Chaplin began performing on stage at a young age and quickly demonstrated an extraordinary gift for physical comedy, mimicry, and emotional nuance. By the age of 14, he was performing with small theater companies, and in his teens, he joined Fred Carnot's vaudeville troupe, a move that changed the course of his life. With Carnot, he traveled to the United States and was soon discovered by Max Sennett of Keystone Studios. It was 1914 when Chaplin made his film debut in Making a Living, but his genius emerged fully formed in his second film, Kid Auto Races at Venice, where he introduced the now legendary Tramp character. The Tramp, wearing baggy pants, a tight coat, oversized shoes, and a derby hat, quickly became a global icon. With his twirling cane and expressive eyes, Chaplin built a cinematic persona rooted in vulnerability, humor, and an indefinable spiritual resilience. From the very beginning, he treated cinema not just as entertainment, but as emotional storytelling, a mirror for the age of mechanization and mass society. Chaplin's rise in the film industry was meteoric. Within a year of his debut, he was writing and directing his own shorts, refining his unique combination of slapstick, satire, and sentiment. At Keystone, then S&A, and later Mutual Film Corporation, he crafted increasingly sophisticated two-reel comedies that resonated with a global audience. Films like The Tramp, The Bank, and The Immigrant didn't merely amuse. They reflected the social conditions of the time: poverty, displacement, and inequality. In The Immigrant, for instance, Chaplin not only humorously portrays the immigrant experience, but also levels a subtle critique of the American immigration system. He transformed slapstick into an expressive form of visual poetry, often revealing the inner life of the downtrodden without ever speaking a word. By 1917, Chaplin was the most famous film actor in the world, and with his growing fame came greater creative control. In 1919, he co-founded United Artists alongside Mary Pickford, Douglas Fairbanks, and D.W. Griffith. The formation of United Artists gave Chaplin complete autonomy over his work, an almost unprecedented position in the early Hollywood studio system. This freedom culminated in The Kid, 1921, his first feature-length film. Combining autobiographical pain with artistic maturity, The Kid tells the story of a tramp who finds and raises an abandoned child, played brilliantly by Jackie Coogan. Drawing directly from his childhood experiences in London's slums and institutions, Chaplin infused the film with extraordinary emotional depth. Its mix of social commentary and slapstick was revolutionary. Audiences were moved to tears and laughter in equal measure. The film's success confirmed that cinema could be both popular and profound, and it firmly established Chaplin not only as a master of comedy, but as a serious artist. He was no longer just a performer. He was a director, writer, editor, and even composer, an auteur before the term existed. Chaplin's reputation as a filmmaker with an unmatched command of emotional tone only deepened. His next major feature, The Gold Rush, 1925, was set during the Klondike Gold Rush and featured some of the most enduring sequences in silent film history. The tramp cooking and eating his own shoe during a snowstorm, hallucinating his companion as a giant chicken, and performing the iconic roll dance with 2 bread rolls on forks. But beneath the comic spectacle was a serious meditation on loneliness, survival, and the hunger, both literal and emotional, that defines the human experience. The film was technically ambitious, with elaborate miniatures and special effects, and it showcased Chaplin's meticulous craftsmanship. He was known to spend days or weeks perfecting a single gag, not merely for laughs, but for emotional impact. He once said he wanted The Gold Rush to be the film he was remembered for, and audiences responded, commercially and critically, with overwhelming praise. But as cinema transitioned into the sound era with the release of The Jazz Singer in 1927, Chaplin faced a dilemma. The talkies were here to stay, yet he feared that spoken dialogue would shatter the tramp's universal appeal. So, in defiance of the industry's momentum, he released City Lights, 1931, a silent film with synchronized musical score, composed by Chaplin himself, and sound effects, but no spoken words. The film follows the tramp as he falls in love with a blind flower girl and attempts to help her gain her sight through a series of misadventures. It is widely considered a masterpiece, particularly its closing scene in which the now-sighted girl realizes the tramp was her benefactor. The moment is wordless yet emotionally overwhelming. Her tentative recognition, his bashful smile. It's an encounter more moving than any monologue. With City Lights, Chaplin proved that silence, in the right hands, could still be louder than speech. After the triumph of City Lights, Chaplin turned his gaze more pointedly toward the modern world's anxieties. His next film, Modern Times, 1936, was an audacious hybrid, mostly silent but incorporating sound effects and limited use of his own voice for the first time, in a nonsense song sung in gibberish Italian, French, English. Here, Chaplin confronted the dehumanizing effects of industrial capitalism, mass production, and the mechanical regimentation of modern labor. The tramp becomes literally swallowed by factory gears, reduced to a cog in the industrial system, and force-fed by an absurd automatic lunch machine. In another scene, mistaken for a communist agitator, he is imprisoned and, ironically, finds comfort in the predictability of jail. Partnering with Paulette Goddard's character, a barefoot street waif also struggling to survive, they search for a stable life, always just out of reach. Though Modern Times is wildly funny, its undertones are bitter, a satire of a world where people are subsumed by the very systems meant to serve them. Despite Chaplin's initial reluctance to adopt synchronized sound, he continued evolving. By 1940, with fascism ascendant and World War II engulfing Europe, Chaplin broke his silence definitively with The Great Dictator. In it, he played both a fascist leader, Adenoid Hinkle, a thinly veiled parody of Hitler, and a humble Jewish barber, separated by circumstance and mistaken identity. While the film used humor to deflate tyranny, it culminated in a bold, sincere speech from the barber, breaking character to deliver a plea for peace, democracy, and human decency. This climactic monologue, written by Chaplin himself, became one of the most famous in cinema history. Its passionate rejection of hatred and call for unity transcended the screen and echoed the moral urgency of the time. Though controversial, it was undeniably courageous. Though The Great Dictator was a commercial success and remains one of Chaplin's most daring artistic statements, the post-war climate in the United States grew increasingly hostile toward him. As Cold War tensions mounted, Chaplin's outspoken political views, pacifism, and refusal to adopt American citizenship drew scrutiny. He supported Soviet-American cooperation during World War II, spoke out against capitalism's extremes, and was unafraid to criticize inequality. all of which led to accusations of communist sympathies. J. Edgar Hoover's FBI opened a file on him, and tabloid media painted him as both morally suspect and politically subversive. His personal life, too, drew controversy, particularly his relationships with much younger women and several paternity suits, one of which, though scientifically debunked, severely damaged his reputation. In 1952, while Chaplin was en route to London for the premiere of his film Limelight, the U.S. government revoked his re-entry permit, effectively exiling him from the country that had made him a star. He chose to settle in Switzerland, where he would remain for the rest of his life. Though wounded by the betrayal, he did not abandon his art. In 1957, he released A King in New York, a biting satire of McCarthyism, celebrity culture, and American conformity. The film was not shown in the U.S. until 1973, but resonated deeply with European audiences. His final film, A Countess from Hong Kong, 1967, starring Marlon Brando and Sophia Loren, was a commercial failure, but Chaplin was no longer driven by market demands. In 1972, after 2 decades of exile, he was invited back to America to receive an honorary Academy Award. At the ceremony, he received a 12-minute standing ovation, the longest in Oscar history. Time had tempered politics, and the world was ready to celebrate his genius again. In his final years, he lived quietly in Switzerland with his wife and their children until his death on Christmas Day, 1977. Charlie Chaplin was not merely a performer. He was one of cinema's earliest and most complete auteurs. He wrote, directed, produced, edited, acted in, and even composed music for nearly all of his films. Long before the term auteur theory was coined, Chaplin embodied the principle of total artistic authorship. His perfectionism was legendary. He would shoot dozens, even hundreds, of takes to capture the emotional or comedic beat he envisioned. He treated filmmaking as a symphonic art form, where rhythm, timing, and movement coalesced into visual poetry. One of his most groundbreaking contributions was his command of pantomime, his ability to convey complex psychological states using only physical gestures. His characters never needed to speak because their humanity was expressed through posture, eyes, tempo, and subtle motion. Chaplin's films were also technologically progressive. He pioneered synchronized musical scores for silent films, used inventive camera techniques and set designs, and blended realism with carefully constructed artifice. His sets often mimicked city streets but were controlled environments, allowing him to choreograph every movement and shadow. The Tramp's world was timeless because it existed between realism and fantasy, a space where modern anxieties played out as universal fables. More importantly, Chaplin expanded the emotional range of comedy. He demonstrated that laughter and sorrow were not opposites, but siblings. In the hands of a master, a pratfall could lead to revelation. A chase could reveal class struggle. A smile could carry the weight of a lifetime. This blending of the comic and tragic, now foundational in visual storytelling, was radical in his era. His influence extends far beyond his lifetime. Filmmakers like Akira Kurosawa, Federico Fellini, Satyajit Ray, and even contemporary artists like Guillermo del Toro have cited Chaplin as a key inspiration. Chaplin's global reach was unprecedented. By the 1920s, his films were being shown in every continent, from bustling American cities to rural villages in India and China. He became, arguably, the first truly international movie star, and the Tramp the first universally recognizable fictional character of the 20th century. What made this possible was not just his silent format, which transcended language barriers, but the universality of his themes: hunger, dignity, love, exclusion, and the absurdities of modern life. In colonial and post-colonial nations, the Tramp became a symbol of resistance. mocking authority, sidestepping social norms, and surviving oppressive systems with wit rather than weapons. In India, he was revered by thinkers like Jawaharlal Nehru and artists like Satyajit Ray, who saw in Chaplin's films a humanist protest against industrial exploitation and Western arrogance. In the Soviet Union, his work was praised for its critique of capitalist machinery, and his early films were shown even during Stalin's reign. Though politics would later complicate this admiration, his cinematic legacy remained untarnished. In the West, too, Chaplin's appeal was intergenerational. Children laughed at the visual comedy, while adults appreciated the subtle critique embedded in each gesture. Scholars have since explored his films through various lenses: Marxist, Freudian, existentialist, uncovering layers that go far beyond the surface of slapstick. Films like Modern Times and The Great Dictator are now taught in university courses on film history, labor studies, ethics, and political science. The Tramp's image has been endlessly reproduced in advertising, cartoons, murals, and even protest art. Despite having made his last film decades ago, Chaplin's influence has never waned. His ability to expose human vulnerability without sentimentality, to critique society without cynicism, remains unmatched. He showed that cinema could be a tool of laughter and liberation. Even decades after his death, Charlie Chaplin's films retain a startling immediacy. In an age dominated by digital effects and hyper-paced narratives, his meticulously composed frames and emotionally driven storytelling still feel vital. The issues he addressed, mass surveillance, economic inequality, xenophobia, technological dehumanization, have not faded. If anything, they've become more pronounced. Watching Modern Times in the 21st century feels eerily prophetic. The scenes of factory automation, of a man consumed by the machine he serves, speak not only to the industrial worker of the 1930s, but to today's gig economy and AI-driven labor shifts. His vision of modernity was not anti-technology, but human-centered. He asked, where do people go when systems forget them? In The Great Dictator, the urgency of his speech, his plea for kindness, democracy, and empathy resonates more each time demagogues gain traction in the real world. Chaplin's work is not frozen in history. It evolves with each new crisis, each new injustice. He understood that comedy was a serious business, that a laugh, placed rightly, could do more than 1,000 sermons. What makes his legacy so profound is not just what he achieved during his lifetime, but how his work continues to speak across time, culture, and ideology. His films do not instruct, they illuminate. They allow viewers to reflect on their own lives, on the systems they inhabit, and on the quiet heroism of those who persist in the face of indifference. Chaplin never claimed to have all the answers, but he believed deeply in the value of decency, the absurdity of cruelty, and the power of hope. In every shuffle of the Tramp's shoes, in every tilt of his hat, there is a message that no matter how low the world may push you, the soul remains irrepressible. Throughout the 20th century, few figures have cast as long or as meaningful a shadow over cinema and global cultural discourse as Charlie Chaplin. Born into the squalor and hardship of late Victorian London, he became a symbol of dignity for the downtrodden and the dislocated, a mirror for the marginalized, and a poet of the human condition. His life story alone is emblematic of modern struggle. A boy abandoned by institutions, shaped by the cruelty of poverty, and propelled into a new century by a talent that was as rare as it was universal. But Chaplin did more than rise from rags to riches. He elevated comedy to an art form capable of expressing despair, love, resistance, and transcendence without uttering a word. His Tramp was not just a comic creation, but a vessel for modern anxieties, an individual lost in crowds, vulnerable in industrial systems, defiant in the face of humiliation. He showed that the smallest gestures, a tilt of the head, a stumble, a flick of the wrist, could contain whole narratives. Chaplin's mastery of timing, pathos, and visual rhythm created a cinematic language that needs no translation. It is not hyperbole to say that every filmmaker who treats comedy or silence seriously walks in a shadow. Yet what truly endures is not only Chaplin's technical genius, but his unwavering humanism. Even in his darkest satire, he never mocked the poor, the weak, or the broken. His villains were systems of mechanization, militarism, bureaucracy, not people. In a century often defined by dehumanization, Chaplin insisted on the sacredness of the individual, the necessity of kindness, and the redemptive power of a shared smile. In the years since his death, Chaplin's influence has only grown deeper, not merely as a historical figure, but as a living part of cinema's DNA. His films are still studied in universities, screened at festivals, restored by archivists, and discovered anew by audiences who find in his work something startlingly relevant. In an age saturated with speed and spectacle, his patience, his attention to gesture, and his belief in emotional truth remain radical. Modern comedians borrow his timing. Political satirists borrow his courage. Filmmakers borrow his eye for movement and symbolism. The Tramp lives on, not because he is nostalgic, but because he is timeless. He remains a companion for those who feel unseen, unheard, or left behind. His silent steps echo in the loudest places. Chaplin's story teaches us that art born from pain can heal, that laughter rooted in compassion can liberate, and that cinema, at its best, is not an escape from life, but a deep, luminous engagement with it. At a time when technology threatens to overpower humanity, when borders harden and ideologies divide, the image of the Tramp walking into the horizon with nothing but a cane and a smile reminds us of something urgent. That dignity does not come from wealth or power, but from resilience, from empathy, from enduring with grace. Charlie Chaplin gave the 20th century its most expressive face and its most eloquent silence. More than a performer or a director, he was a moral artist, one who held up a mirror not to flatter us, but to make us feel. And long after the frames stop rolling, what remains is that rarest of legacies, not just admiration, but love. In our digitally mediated world, where content is consumed in seconds and discarded with a swipe, Chaplin's cinema feels both ancient and startlingly new. His commitment to emotional clarity, physical expression, and narrative economy contrasts sharply with the excesses of modern filmmaking. Yet in an age obsessed with algorithms and virality, Chaplin's artistry reminds us of something elemental. That genuine connection is not manufactured but felt. His ability to make millions laugh with a stumble or cry with a glance is a testament to the power of simplicity grounded in truth. Remarkably, his influence also permeates digital culture. Memes, GIFs, and short-form video often mirror the very techniques Chaplin pioneered. His work anticipated the virality of gesture, the universality of reaction, the looped visual joke that transcends language. Moreover, Chaplin's persona continues to inspire creators in emerging spaces, in animation, in independent cinema, in political street theater, and even in virtual storytelling. The Tramp, stripped of setting and sound, becomes a kind of universal citizen, stateless, classless, yet somehow at home in every time and place. He belongs to all because he came from nothing and never ceased to belong to the least. That enduring accessibility is not an accident of history, but the result of Chaplin's insistence that cinema served the common emotional denominator. His legacy lies not just in what he made, but in the space he opened, for humor without cruelty, for art without elitism, and for storytelling that invites everyone in. In that sense, Charlie Chaplin is not only a figure from the past, but a guide for what cinema and empathy might still become. To watch Chaplin is to witness the fusion of body and idea, where performance becomes philosophy and movement becomes metaphor. No performer before or since has embodied so completely the struggle of being human. Its comedy, its fragility, its longing for meaning. The Tramp is a comic figure, yes, but beneath the cane twirling and pratfalls lies a deeply existential character. He is always in search for food, for shelter, for affection, for purpose. He moves through a world that misunderstands him, exploits him, pities him, but never entirely defeats him. His resilience is not heroic in the traditional sense. He does not fight wars or deliver speeches until the great dictator. Instead, he survives by adapting, by inventing joy in deprivation, by turning failure into play. In this way, Chaplin's art becomes a quiet rebellion against despair. He does not glamorize poverty or romanticize suffering, but he insists that the human spirit, absurd, awkward, and often misplaced, is still worthy of laughter and love. For actors, Chaplin remains a masterclass in minimalism and expression. For writers, a model of clarity without exposition. For directors, a benchmark of tonal balance, where comedy and tragedy are not opposites but neighboring rooms. His films operate in silence, but they speak volumes about injustice, alienation, and tenderness. And for audiences, whether in 1925 or 2025, he offers a form of consolation that few artists manage, not through escapism, but through recognition. He tells us that the world is often cruel, but that dignity is possible, and that sometimes simply walking away with a crooked smile is the most radical act of all.
Believer in what Charlie Chaplin said is that a life is a tragedy in close-up and a comedy in long shot. If you sit back visually on a situation, it ought to
help everyone if possible. Jew, Gentile, black man, white. We all want to help one another. Human beings are like that. We want to live by each other's happiness, not by each other's misery. We don't want to hate and despise one another. In this world there's room for everyone, and the good earth is rich and can provide for everyone. Do not despair. The misery that is now upon us is but the passing of greed, the bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish. Soldiers, don't give yourselves to brutes. Men who despise you, enslave you, who regiment your lives, tell you what to do, what to think, and what to feel, who drill you, diet you, treat you like cattle, use you as cannon fodder. Don't give yourselves to these unnatural men, machine men with machine minds and machine hearts. You are not machines, you are not cattle, you are men. You have the love of humanity in your hearts. You don't hate, only the unloved hate, the unloved and the unnatural. Soldiers, don't fight for slavery, fight for liberty. In the 17th chapter of St. Luke it is written, the kingdom of God is within man, not one man nor a group of men, but in all men, in you. You, the people, have the power to create machines, the power to create happiness. You, the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful, to make this life a wonderful adventure. Then in the name of democracy, let us use that power. Let us all unite. Let us fight for a new world, a decent world, that will give men a chance to work, that will give youth a future and old age a security. By the promise of these things, brutes have risen to power, but they lie. They do not fulfill that promise. They never will. Dictators free themselves, but they enslave the people. Now let us fight to fulfill that promise. Let us fight to free the world, to do away with national barriers, to do away with greed, with hate and intolerance. Let us fight for a world of reason, a world where science and progress will lead to all men's happiness.
you.